Well, hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar, Change Management of Food Safety Culture, Effective Strategies for Achieving Greatness. I'm Adrienne Bloom, Editorial Director of Food Safety Magazine, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. So thanks for joining us. So I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. We have Dr. Lone Jespersen, Principal and Founder of Cultivate SA. We also have Hugo Gutierrez, formerly the Global Quality, Safety, Health, and Environmental Officer at Kerry. And then we have Kimberly Crawford, Vice President of Human Resources and Safety at Birchwood Foods. So for today's webinar, we'll first hear from each of our speakers individually, and then we'll reconvene for a short discussion. Then after our discussion, our presenters will take some time to answer your questions that come in throughout the webinar. So don't forget that you can submit those at any time during the webinar in the Q&A and chat section of the webinar console. Today's event is also being recorded and will be archived on food-safety.com.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. I'm absolutely delighted to have been invited by Food Safety Magazine to just share a couple of thoughts around change management, especially as it relates to food safety culture, and what are some of those strategies that you can use and apply, others have applied to achieve greatness. I'm also very excited to be with two good friends and colleagues on this webinar from industry. And between the three of us, we're going to share some different stories that can hopefully help you on this very complex topic as well. Three questions I'd like to hit on in a short, setting the stage before we get into discussing some of your questions. One is, are we making lasting changes when it comes to changing culture, adapting your food safety culture, and impacting performance? The other one is there one path for adapting your food safety culture that can work for everybody? I think intuitively we all know the answer to that one, and I'll share three different cases just to illustrate the answer. And then also, how can you reinforce whatever path you choose to continuously adapt and change your food safety culture? So are we making lasting changes? One of the statistics that we look at a lot at Cultivate through our work with companies across the world is, do those that we ask to add input into assessing food safety culture from companies, from regulators, retailers, manufacturers, do they believe that the changes they're making is lasting? So the changes that are put in place today, will they also be there a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And will they have had those impacts on performance that we're looking for when making change? And we're still seeing that 73% of over 4,000 manufacturing sites say that that's probably our biggest challenge. And it's not hard to understand, I think, because there's so many different changes that are going on in the macro environment around a food plant. There might be new CEO coming in, there might be new regulations within the plant as well. There might be new leaders, there might be new products being launched. There could be a recall, there could be some other things going on. So there's just these ongoing things that the plant has to adapt to as well. So it's still one of the biggest challenges for companies when we're talking about adapting food safety cultures. How do we make lasting changes? And that's really also part of what we wanted to hit on today. So if you want to make lasting changes, is there one path that you can take so that you can say, if I take these actions, then there's higher likelihood that I will actually be able to make lasting changes? And lasting changes, again, that results in a change in performance, food safety performance. One of the ways that we've started looking at that at Cultivate and just exploring a little bit is in this 2x2 box. So up the y-axis, we have two different answers to the question, why are you focusing on food safety culture? Very simple. And one answer, the one at the top of this 4 box, is all around, we're doing that because we need to be compliant with external standards or regulations. The bottom answer is, we're doing this because we want to grow our business. So two very simple answers. If we then look at the other side of the 4 box, who participates in your food safety risk assessments? So think about, you can take it all the way down to your hazard plans. Who gives input into what kind of hazards there are in your process flow and how you're assessing them against likelihood and severity? all the way up to your ERM, your enterprise risk management, and who participates, who gives input into those risk assessments. One answer is that it's mostly FSQA. The other one is that it is mostly senior leaders, supervisors, and also your frontline team members. So I'd like to just have you give us a little bit of insights from where you are at in your organization today. And for that, we have 3 poll questions. The first one is about that first question: why are you focusing on food safety culture? There's 2 answers, so we're asking all of you to just help us out here. Are you mostly doing that because you want to be compliant with regulations and external standards? Or is this about growing and improving your business? So we're going to just take about 20 seconds and think about this really candidly. So what's the main driver for you to make change to your food safety culture? Maybe another 10 seconds here. There's some really good answers here, so keep them coming. There we go. Let's end it there, right around that. It's about 37% of you are saying, well, it's actually because we want to be compliant. There's nothing wrong in that. There's not a right or wrong answer here. That's the important piece. And ending out here that there's about 62% of you that are saying that it's about improving and growing your business. So this is a really big shift from 10 years ago when we started Cultivate. It was very much the opposite way around. So this is really good to see. Let's try the other one as well. So who participates in your food safety risk assessment? Is it mostly FSQA and operations? Or is it mostly your senior leaders across functions, so finance, HR, and all of these other very important functions? And is it your supervisors, and do you have your frontline team members in there as well? We'll give that in 20 seconds here as well. We'll see. Very good. It's good participation here, so we really appreciate that. Sometimes it feels like you're just barking out into nowhere, into a big black hole when you're on these webinars virtually. So it's good to see so many of you engaging. So let's close that one there. So the risk assessment, we're seeing that it's 68% of you that are saying that it's food safety and quality plus operations. And then it's just jumped up to, let's close that out there, Vanya, if we can, to 33% leaders, frontline, and supervisors. So when we look at those 2 measures, there's a bit of a follow-up question because I somewhat thought we might get to this level of engagement in the risk assessments. Let's just try this very quick question. Think about your top 10 senior executives in your company, and very frank, obviously nobody knows who says what here, so that's wonderful. How many of you believe that your 10 senior executives, so the top 10 senior executives know all of your food safety risks? So now we're talking also across CEOs, we're talking about owners, we're talking about heads of HR and people safety. We're talking about those commercial directors. So the whole shebang. So just give that another 5 seconds. Brilliant. Bonnie, what do you think? Should we close that one there? Thank you. Really appreciate it. So what we're seeing is a really interesting distribution there that, not surprising, across the group that we have on the webinar, there's different company cultures, and therefore you'll also have different levels of what your senior executives know about your food safety risks. It also is a really good just jump off point into the comment around, so is there a path for changing and maturing your food safety culture by adapting and managing the changes? that fits all. And the clear answer is, of course, no to that. And what you're giving us here is also some data to back that up with, because your senior executives are at different levels when it comes to knowing their food safety risks. And that's reality also what we see across businesses. And it's about for you individually to know where is your starting point so that you can choose the best path that's going to get you to the highest level of performance in your food safety through your organizational culture. So let's look at 3 success stories of 3 of our clients that we've anonymized for the sake of just protecting all of their good work. But we start with a company in the US. We started working with this company in 2022, and on our maturity model from 1 to 5, they came in at 1.2. It was very much a CEO-led reason for why we were there. And the executive team was deeply into also defining the change plan. And there was some really good monthly engagements when we started out. That resulted in 2023 that they had really improved their culture to a score of 2.1 on the 1 to 5 scale. And a lot of that had to do with plant leadership teams who were much more engaged now. So when you answered the question before as for who does the risk assessments, and also why are you making change to food safety? Why the why question here was clearly changed from because we have to be compliant to we want to improve our business as well. And they also had a really good dashboard that they put together. So the next step for this particular client is really to take all of that good work and say, so how do we go from now we have a really good value proposition. We need to change food safety culture. We need to be stay mature when it comes to what we do with food safety because it's improving and growing our business. And we do that by getting more and more people in to the risk work. So having a much stronger what could happen instead of what has happened. So that's really one of the potential paths that this company can take after this. Then we also have one of our good clients in the UK who we started working with in 2021. They came in, they started at 2.1, and it was very much a state where they had food safety and people safety combined in their efforts. They started by implementing a system just to gather data on a regular basis, and that led them to a score of 3.7. So they took a different path. They said, okay, today, we are compliant. We look at our food safety culture because we have to. It's mostly food safety and quality and operations that do our risk assessments. So look at what could happen. We need to get at that first. So they started really shifting it over to saying, so how can we get many more people involved in saying what could happen? And they did that by having really good discussions of, they called them what ifs in their team huddles on the plant floor. Instead of waiting for something to happen, they just did a lot of Gemba walks. They did these what ifs in the huddles on front line as well. And that has just created much more engagement across many different levels of people when it comes to finding risks and what could happen for food safety. So for them, the next step they're taking is to move into where, okay, so now we have really good control internally on this. Now we need to look at how does this create some value for growing our business as well. So a little bit of a different way of making change, but it's same questions that they're answering or asking themselves, just in a different order. Then we have this wonderful client in Australia that we started with in 2019. They came in first time we measured at 2.1, very regulatory oriented. So close relationship with the regulators. And they also looked at having these. So once a year, we have a change plan for food safety culture. They had a little bit of a different path because then we came back and we did another measurement in 2022 and they had dropped. So they had had a big change in leadership. They had really lost a lot of that institutional knowledge that they'd built up right up to 2019. And we had to go back to basics and say, so how can we get leaders much more involved in food safety and understanding what it is that it means to our business? So not even talking about risks so much, but just the basics for food safety. Then in 2024, they did a lot of work for a couple of years and put the responsibility very constructively, so very positive. So a plant manager would own food safety, but in a way of measuring, it was about how the plant manager would collaborate with his or her teams to go out. Again, Gemba plays a big part for this company. Go out and work together to talk with those that are working on the line. So if I'm on the line and day in and day out, I'm looking at products, then I would see my leaders come through with a Gemba walk, and they would have Gemba carts with them, and they would have been really clearly trained on that we have 2 of these and 1 of this, and therefore when you do Gemba walks, it's because you're out there listening to your people. And they also started looking very hard at cost of quality. So in this case, the change path and creating that lasting change is now about bringing it from, now we have a value proposition that says we can grow our business because we've got really good control of food safety and we're getting really good at looking at risks in operations. Now it's about bringing that risk perspective into everybody at leadership and other functional as well. So these 3 examples are really just to say, when we're talking about change management, we're talking about achieving greatness. There is not one path that fits everybody. So now that we have these momentums, as we're seeing in these 3 different companies, what can you do to reinforce whatever you're choosing? I have to come back to recognize to realize. So if you want to make change that's lasting, you have to recognize people for it. And there's a really strong connection between people who trust their senior leadership, and how they feel, how trust is driven by how they feel recognized. The way that we look at that, and this comes from Global Force, so it's not something we've come up with, they do this study every year, is to say that when there's trust in leadership, you have the biggest influence on your culture if you're trying to change culture. That's also why we're saying that risk assessment has to involve senior leadership. When you said in your assessment of whether your senior leaders, executives know your food safety risks, if they don't, or if they somewhat do, then we have a bit of an issue, because if I'm on the front line working on one of your pieces of equipment, or if I'm at 2 a.m. out in the sanitation shift and I get into a conversation with somebody senior that doesn't really seem to know what they're talking about when it comes to food safety, I don't have necessarily trust in that they're going to do what is needed to preserve us. In this study, 65% trusted the senior leaders. It also spills over into turnover, so that's great. But it's mostly about saying that 82% of workers recognized in the last month trust their senior leaders. So we have to connect recognition with the path that you're choosing when you're making change. We make use of, at Cultivate, what we have come to know as the Crawford Pyramid. And that's because you're going to hear from Kimberly Crawford in a second. Kimberly was the one that taught me about this one. So we have 3 different levels of recognition, and you can look at these from a frequency perspective: annual, very formal. You can look at a more informal, it's monthly to quarterly, and then you can look at the everyday. So every day when you do a Gemba walk in the store or somewhere else, that's the frequency. Then we look at impact. And impact can be, when it's very formal, what's the impact on people actually building trust or changing behavior? And what we're clearly seeing on that is the lower we get into the pyramid, into the bottom of the pyramid, the higher the impact. So the more we have those daily conversations, the daily just checking in with each other, the higher the impact the recognition will have on people's behaviors. The more impact we have on behaviors, the greater likelihood it is that you will actually see lasting change coming out of all of those great efforts that you're putting into your food safety culture efforts. Lastly, I just want to end on this this one sort of summary. Heard this great joke. I'm terrible at jokes, so hope I don't get this wrong. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 1, if the light bulb wants to change. So when we talk about change management of food safety culture and effective strategies, we can have the best strategies in the world. If we haven't put the effort into recognition and what motivates people, we are likely not going to see that light bulb change and will stay in darkness forever. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Hugo to take us away on the next section on our webinar today.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here, and thank you, Lon, for the great insights. What I want to do here is just really to share a personal and professional story and give some color, so a personal story of what Lon just shared with everybody. And this story started in 2018. And I was very comfortable working in this very nice company. And I'm not going to tell you the name of the company, but I'm going to tell you the location. I was based in a beautiful town called Hershey, Pennsylvania. Beautiful place. And I received this call from a company called Kerry. And everything that I'm going to speak is public information, so you can search it out. So there's no confidential. So we can speak the information so we can all learn from it. Certainly for me, it was a fantastic learning. And the invitation was to transform a food safety system to move it from, let's call it problems, to world class. And the reason they wanted to do that is because they had a very important recall in the marketplace, probably one of the biggest in the US, certainly for that year. So, 140 people got salmonella, 36 people got hospitalized, Justice of Department was included. I think there was something like $18 million on fines. One person went to jail, as chaotic as it could be. And then, for whatever reason, that was attractive to me. A little bit of craziness, maybe, too much coffee, but the opportunity to transform a company was probably attractive. And I show up there with, experiences with very big companies, right? General Mills, Pfizer, Hershey, and so on. So I thought I really knew how to do this, right? I really got it. This is easy for me. And I remember sitting there on day one and week 2 or so, and didn't know where to start, It's a big footprint, very global, 36 countries, around 200 manufacturing plants. So big monster, if you want, a lot of heads. So where do you start, right? So that was the question that I was asking myself, right? We all know a quality system. Yes, audits are important, supplier managements are important, but can you do everything at the same time, especially when you're sitting in a crisis? So I run into a crisis in the middle of the crisis. So in one hand, you got to stop the crisis, but in the other hand, you need to make sure the crisis is not going to happen again. So I decided to start with a strategic plan. So what are we going to do? Not just year 1, but year 2, year 3, year 4. And very quick, I realized that in order for a strategic plan can be paper, so it doesn't work at all. It does work only if you put your team behind it, okay? It's very, very important to have the team behind it. So I had to include the team and make sure that they work with me in the strategic plan. The second piece I learned from a strategic plan, which I don't feel before, is that all the leaders have to be part of that. So horizontal alignment. So your partner on manufacturing, your partner on maintenance, your partner on logistics, on marketing, they need to be part of this. You cannot do these transformations by yourself, for sure. And it spent a lot of time going back and forward to our leaders, the COO, the COO, and they keep sending me back saying, no, that's probably not the right one for this company, too aggressive, we don't have all that money, we're not going to be able to hire all that people, all of those things, right? Until I got it right. And then once I got it, I realized a strategic plan is just not something that has legs. So I moved to do something that I like to call a journey. And it's basically a strategic plan is a long-term plan, right? In this case was 5 years. But what do you do every year? And how do you make, what are the proposals for every year? So prioritization, what are the top 3 things that you do year one? And that by definition also means what are the things that you're not going to do on year one. And then the same on year two, on year three. But here's something very important. Year two has to build on year one. Year three has to build on year two, and so on. If you don't achieve that, the strategic plan is probably worthless. So to ensure that that was sound, and again, you need to go back to the alignment, because if people are not aligned and are not behind, not just the strategic plan, but the journey that you're proposing to a company, it's not going to fly. So the CEO needs to be there. The financial director needs to be there. The marketing director has to be there. And then once you finish that, again, it took me several iterations. A lot of times they say, no, that's too aggressive. No, we don't have that capital plan. No, we're not going to hire that amount of people, which was right for the company. So I needed to go back and repropose and be creative. But I realized people have to put their mouth behind, or the money behind your mouth, right? The pockets. So we put a capital plan, human resources plan, so people plan, resource plan, a process plan, and say, in order for this to work, that there should be some type of capital plan, money plan. It's not going to be free. Okay, there were plans that needed capital, right? You need to fix the roof or the floors or whatever that is. In some cases, we needed knowledge. Sanitation, as an example, we needed to get better on sanitation or environmental programs, whatever that is. So we needed knowledge. In some cases, we needed people. You need to have somebody that actually going to lead sanitation or lead microbiology. So all of that needed to be so clear, because there's a difference between a leader telling you, yes, of course, we're going to support food safety. A lot of people will say that. It's very different to say, here's the money in order to enable food safety, or here's the resources, or here's the knowledge, or here's the capital plan. So to have that in black and white with probably a signature to say, and again, nothing is ideal. You're never going to get the money or the resources that you like, but to have that conversation. And again, if you're not going to have it in year two, but you're going to have it in year 3 or 4, you better know that so you can plan accordingly. And that way you can be effective. And then once you have that, then you can run with your team and then do what I would call the stuff. What people do we need? What capabilities we need to get better? What type of processes? In the case of Kerry, we needed to do better at M&A. We were buying a lot of companies. If you don't do M&A well, mergers and acquisitions, you continue to bring problems, right? Micro capital plans, investments, procedures. We came in year 2 to a clear realization that without digitalization, we were not going to support and maintain all the work that we were doing. I mean, smaller companies can do it with no digitalization. Big companies with the presence in 36 countries and 200 plants, they do need digitalization. So that was another big investment, couple of $1 million on investment. So we needed to actually do that. And the board approved that, and we were able to do that. That was a game changer for us. There's no change that is good if it cannot be maintained. So you don't move to year 2 if year 1 is not solid. So you got to track it. So KPIs, how we're going to measure that we did the job in year 1 before we move to year 2. It was fundamental. In year 2 or 3, I start learning that if I didn't position, and I think you mentioned this, Lon, that if I didn't position the team as a business partner, as a technical team that has grown in mind, so we do a lot of food safety stuff, a lot of quality stuff, a lot of technical piece, science piece, yes, for food safety, but also because we want to make sure the business continue to grow, we will not have credibility to maintain the pace of improvement. So teaching people a new agenda, a new knowledge, influencing, understanding a P&L, understanding a business language. So in our meetings, they can actually link what we're doing to the growth, to in some cases, even cost savings. It was important to achieve credibility and continue the track of improvement. Again, there were many tools, and I'm sure many companies here will agree with me that they help us. I didn't need to be wiser than everybody else, but there's something that the food industry needs to learn more, and it's about sharing and doing things together. So for instance, I picked a tool called Golden Six from Kellogg's. They shared it with me. Fantastic food safety tool. I didn't have to invent it. I learned it. I think Tyson Food shared with me something called Whiteboard Geeks, so Whiteboard, which is a learning and teaching opportunity for operators. Movie making, storytelling, I took that from Hershey. So we were doing a lot of behavioral change tools that help us to make the transformation in 4 to 5 years. And I'll say, as I was leaving Kerry, we got a lot of reward from big companies, call it McDonald's and so on, around the transformation and what we achieved in food safety culture. Food safety culture was in the heart of this transformation. It was that pin that you put in the rock so the rock doesn't roll back, and maintain all the efforts. I think I realized as a leader, after I reflect on all this journey, that a lot of the things that we do is about people, and it's about the people of the company. I saw some of the results. I will disagree with few of those comments. I think if we don't really strongly believe that our influence has to be around the company, of course, we do a lot of work with supply chain and R&D and so on, but if we don't take the time to influence and change mindsets and hearts across the company, it's probably going to be difficult to maintain. Here's one tip. There is something that I have seen in many companies that is probably the 4-year mark. When you engage in these venues, in these journeys, sometimes after year 4, people tend to forget, hey, we don't have problems anymore. It's a time to start doing cost savings again. It's a time to save money. It's a time to stop the journey because we could reinvest on growth or something like that. So again, that's why everything that I say is so important, because you don't want to get to year 4 or 5 without the speed, without the pin that sustain the rock. You want to continue to grow. Yes, maybe a slower pace because you've done a lot of the big investments, but you always want to have that continuous improvement mind, and you want your leaders to believe that's the right thing to do. So that's the story. I'm very proud. It was a difficult story, but I'm very proud to move from, let's call it problems, to what I would say best in class. The KPI will support it. A lot of this work was culture. When I speak with culture, of course, that's behaviors. And when you speak behaviors, I think is people. And there's many tools. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that Lon mentioned. I think those tools are available and should be available for all of us, so we can use them to transform the behaviors. At the end, I remember presenting to a lot of the board people, and they always were concerned with this type of facts, that food safety were in the hands of, let's say, somebody in India or in Colombia in the third shift that was making decisions every single minute in a line. And it was somebody that I will probably never meet. They will never meet. And we rely on that person taking the right decisions every single minute in that line, without supervision or without me saying you shall do this, doing it by heart. And that's, to me, a good summary about food safety culture. Lon, just to finish the story, and this will be another story for another venue, but to leave you thinking about this, I did also a transformation in Hershey, but Hershey didn't have any problems when we started this transformation. They actually had a very good system. So the challenge was different. How do you make a transformation without having this burning platform like a recall? And you do it because you don't want to have a problem. You want to be proactive, right? or do you want to be the best? That journey was called From Good to Great, and it did require adjusting a lot of the things I mentioned to ensure you have the right support. So when you don't have a recall or a problem as a burning platform, sometimes that's easier to make change or to drive change. And the company and everybody thinks they have a very good system, but you as an expert team, you can be more proactive and preventive. What do you do? And that's a question that I'll leave with you. And I'll be happy at some point or even during the questions to answer some of those questions, because that was a very interesting journey as well. So with that, I'd like to ask Kim to help us with her experiences. She has also a very interesting story to tell us. Go ahead, Kim.
We all do have a story, and you referred to it as a journey. And this is absolutely, in the next few minutes, I will tell you a little bit about the Birchwood Foods food safety culture transformation journey. Here we have, this is what we've lived by. I think many of you on the call live by this. We have USDA's definition. What is food safety? We have it equals conditions and practices. It's very clear. If those conditions and practices don't prevent contamination and foodborne illness, then we've failed. And I think that many of us have potentially experienced that in our careers in either being further processors or any type of manufacturer. My ask here is to consider this. What if addressing our food safety failures was not just about the science about improving those conditions and practices, better sanitation practices, more aggressive swabbing, a militant approach to hand washing, handing out corrective actions for people who didn't follow those GMPs. Do all those activities actually help us really solve our food safety failures? And here at Birchwood, our food safety journey began with our CEO's phone call to a very well-known food scientist in our industry, someone who had helped us with some challenges in our plants previously. And he asked him, what are we going to do to solve, food safety challenges in our plants? And the recommendation was not adding, more tests, more science into the mix. And while the science is very important, he directed us to a food safety culture resource. And so begins that journey. That journey was about culture, creating shared values, beliefs, and behaviors, and prioritizing what we believe. The impact that intentional creation of culture will have on the people in your plants who are the key to your food safety success, it's been critical for us. That is where we had to turn to. Those values and beliefs systems must be understood, and from there, behavior starts to follow. It is not transactional, as so many of the processes and the way we do things daily in our plants is. This is transformational change. We needed to get to the hearts and minds of everyone on our plant floors. And from our leadership, Lone talked about the pyramid. It needed to start with our leadership team, and we needed to build the pyramid from there, from the top down. I'm going to advance my slides here. So that journey in getting everyone aligned, we had challenges to overcome. We had to shift, and now we have human resources in the mix. We're the new kids in the mix here. You've got operations and food safety folks who are used to tackling these problems. And even sometimes your HR team is not sure why they're at the table either. But we needed to get buy-in to the idea that we can work on solving operational problems by focusing on people. And it's often, if not always, one of the most challenging moments in your change process, in your journey. So our food safety teams and our production operations team had to make room for a new way of looking at what we've always done. And that can be uncomfortable. And that's been a part of our journey as well. We had to bring some new resources in. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a few pieces of our story and where we've experienced success. We created a learning and development department. I don't know how training happens in many of your companies, but here training happened. It was, again, very transactional. Our new hires would start, they'd go out onto the plant floor. They were working on packing a product. They'd stand alongside, watch somebody packing it. Okay, you got it. Now they're packing. So we have a mission and a vision and a goal of a learning and development team that will help teach people about our culture, what is valued. So our initial food safety learning was deployed just to ensure we had a learning program for everyone who was hired. They knew exactly what the food safety risks were associated with the jobs that they were doing, and that's what we started with. We have grown that now to a complete standard work instruction program where the core learning, again, that's our mission. You can see that on the slide. Our goal is to ensure that everyone who is working in our plants in whatever capacity understands how they impact food safety risk. Another new resource on our journey, and with a new culture, we developed new teams. What you're seeing there is our foreign material eradication team. And this team was a cross-functional team. They meet weekly, they rotate facilitators. Their mission is to investigate foreign material events and audit our process so that we know where foreign material risks exist in our plant, and then that data gets turned back over to learning and development, and now we have a continuum of what are we learning, what is this team learning, and can we turn that back into some training and learning for our employees to try to avoid those foreign material, specifically those risks. The photo that you see here, this is our gray hats. So anyone on the foreign material team wears a gray hat. Everyone in our plant knows they are part of that team. Our team members from maintenance, production, shipping and receiving, and food safety are shown in that photo. And that team has been in place, and we have a foreign material eradication team in every single one of our plants. It was a big change in our culture here as well, for people to look at those people and say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you looking over at my shoulder at the work I'm doing and looking for foreign material? And now, they are respected members of our plant floor teams. And the fact that they're cross-functional is key. This is not just food safety and quality's problem to work on. So next up, recognition. Lone touched on this a little bit. Hugo touched on this. I really believe that when you are walking the talk, you are also recognizing people who are now adapting and assimilating into the culture. So we recognize and reward what we value. And what we value is those frontline team members. You see a member of our team with 2 members of management. When you see something and you say something, and this story is about an employee who found a small piece of a black rubber ring in a finished goods bag. So he raises that red flag to management, and we can stop the process. He has no fear of retaliation or discipline because we're going to stop the line during production. And even our recognition has gone through a bit of a journey. You see this team, these 2 plant managers out on the plant floor. We recognize that we wanted this recognition visible to the entire team. Everyone that gentleman works with gets to see him being recognized. So we do this out on the plant floor. The employee each month is identified by our plant management, and they're recognized for living our food safety culture. They receive a certificate and recognition and a nice gift card. And that has definitely been a part of our culture that we've grown and continue to develop and expand. So a few final thoughts here. it is not just about transactional change. It is about transformational, pardon me. We are transforming, it's transformational. We need to impact the hearts and minds of people. We have to role model it as leaders. Again, it does start at the top, that pyramid, in a power with way. We can't just hold power over people. That's the way we used to do things. We had habits of just saying we need to get product out the door. And of course we need to please our customers, but we also need to get food safe product out the door. And we all understand our processes and our place in consequences that impact our food safety success or our food safety failure. And wrapping our arms around the people who are close to this process, from our leadership teams to every frontline associate who walks in the door, that has been key to measuring and seeing our food safety culture maturity grow over the last several years. And it's been really rewarding. I know we want to leave some time for some questions, so I'm going to thank everyone. Thank you for listening, and I'll turn it back over to Adrienne.
Great. Thank you so much for those great presentations, Sloan, Hugo, and Kim. And I'd like to remind you that we love your feedback. So you'll be seeing a webinar survey on your screen in a few minutes, and please feel free to take a few minutes to complete that. We always do love to hear from you on how we can make our programs work better for you. So now that we've set the stage with some culture change management tactics and real-life case studies, let's zoom out and discuss a broader view of some of these concepts. And there's a question that I'd like to pose to each one of our speakers here. And this question is a pretty simple one, but I think the answers have a lot of weight. So in one sentence, how would you describe successful change management? And also if you can provide an example of that. And I'd actually like to ask Kim to lead us off on that question, if you don't mind, Kim.
Sure. Absolutely, Adrienne. Thank you. My one sentence, it may be a long-winded sentence, but there are no shortcuts to transforming culture. There's no shortcut to, we want everything to be great tomorrow, next month, next year. The strategies that I talked about that we put into place, that I did share with you, they need time to take hold. Again, we are creatures of habit. So we need time for them to take hold, to measure their effectiveness, which we do annually. We assess where we're at in our food safety culture on an annual basis. So an example is our recognition program. It took a while to dial that in, to get the plant management to not just try to pick somebody the last day before we needed to present it to people. What were we looking for? And we dialed it into that, hey, we really need you to be out there on that plant floor, recognizing that person in front of their teams. It took us about 2 years to really dial that recognition program in. And believe me, people know, everyone knows that we do that recognition. But we couldn't take a shortcut to get there. We needed time to allow everyone to adapt and understand what were we looking to recognize. So, we realize the impact that it has, but don't think that there's any shortcut to getting yourself to a food safe maturity level tomorrow. It's going to take some time.
Great. Thank you, Kim, for that example and also the guidance on no shortcuts. So that's very insightful. Hugo, I'd like to invite you next to answer the question, what describes successful change management and provide an example?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we all need to recognize that change management is hard. And it's something that needs to be, in my case, I put it in front of my strategic plan. And it requires a village, so don't try to do it by yourself. I think every company is different, and there's so much people can absorb. There's so much manufacturing plants can absorb. Change is one of those. So you want to make sure that you allocate the right time to the change. So I will describe what I saw in Kerry in my previous example as a good change management. So when you get into any of our plants, you see safety first, quality always. So you can see it. When you interview any of the plant operators, they will tell you what that means and why their role is important in food safety and what are the important things that they do for food safety. When you talk to a marketing person, a food safety person, or a financial person, they will articulate what is the role in food safety. I think those are few things that this is a complex topic. There are more things that I can mention, but those are some few things that will tell you as a leader that, this company has a good food safety culture. You can smell it, you can see it. I would love to invite my customers to say, you know what, go and audit whatever you want, but talk to the operators and talk to people in the plant and ask them and see what they have to tell you. So that would be an example.
Great. Thank you, Hugo. And Lone, I'd like to invite you to also speak to this question in a sentence or more.
I was in Thailand in a plant with a client last week, and I discovered a new leading indicator for mature food safety culture. It's decibels, so noise level. So we did a full day workshop with 38 people in the room. And there was so much talk across senior leadership, middle management, and frontline team members in the different breakout groups that I had to measure the noise level. And we got to noise level that was approximately the same as a single jet engine. To me, that's a success measure, where you actually have senior leadership and middle management and frontline in breakout groups together, where everybody is just eager to say something and they're speaking out loud with hands and voices, and body language was just going left, right, and center. And to me, that's success. That's when change has landed in a place where people trust senior leaders, that I can speak up, what Kim and Hugo has both spoken to, enable your frontline team members to speak up candidly because they feel recognized, they trust their senior leadership that that's what's expected, and there's no repercussions negative when they do that. And so we're going to start measuring noise level in decibels when we do workshops at Cultivate, because it's a really good indicator of engagement, especially when we have those different levels where there's a power play at play, right? In Thailand, it's a very hierarchical culture. And even in that context, we had this conversation that just went across the different power levels in a plant. So to me, that's a success measure, Adrian.
Adrian, can I offer one last comment?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one experience that got into me was from my previous CEO. His name is Edmund. And we were in a meeting, he was in a meeting, I wasn't there, in actually Mexico. And he was preparing, he took the time to prepare himself. And he wanted to ask the plant manager about the food safety risk in that facility. And they told him, and then he asked about environmental monitoring. And the plant manager was very proud and said, we have none. And then he said, listen, I'm worried that you have none, because maybe that means that you're not looking hard enough. I prefer that you identify and you tell me about the root cause and that you're fixing them, as opposed that you have none. Maybe you're not looking hard enough. And that would send such a strong message across the company. There were a lot of plant managers calling me and say, what do I need to do to find more? Because Edmond is coming next week. So that's a good example of a leader setting the tone on food safety culture. That was a good indicator to me that say, okay, this thing is landing. Because sometimes it's not about what a role like me will do, but what others like a CEO and other leaders will do on my behalf.
Great. Hugo, thanks for that example, and also Lone for the example you gave. Very insightful and very interesting examples there of how change management can be conducted successfully, and some things that can make change management successful. Now we're going to take a few extra minutes, probably over the hour here, and get to some of your questions. We've had a lot of great questions coming in throughout the webinar from attendees, and I'd like to dive straight in so we can make the most of the time we have. I saw a couple of questions about this, and I think this is a good one. Hugo, you mentioned during your talk that you were monitoring KPIs throughout the change management process. Would you mind sharing what some of those KPIs were?
Yeah, and here's another learning. And again, I have to say I did make some mistakes through the process, but you have to start with there's not a KPI. There's the right KPI for the right time of your journey. So we all start with consumer complaints. Yes, it's very lagging, but if you're starting the journey, that's a good way to start. And as you advance, you start with more leading indicators. The last one I was doing, and I think I got help from you, Lon, but it was more around a questionnaire on the plans, and they were questionnaires for our operators. Like, can you stop a line? And will the leader, the plant manager, will congratulate you or they will penalize you? Do you have all the training that you need to make the right decision on? So we start tracking that. That's really leading. And how many proactive and preventive activities we do on food safety. So we move from a very reactive piece, do you have an issue or not, do you have consumer complaints or not, to that. The other piece was root cause analysis. And maybe the last piece is we decide, and this was a game changer, I say, in two companies. It's not about how many issues you detect, it's how many issues you fix. So we move from, if you have 3 issues, we penalize you, or those 3 issues too. Okay, you can have 3 or 4, got it. But we'll penalize you, you don't fix it. If you fix it, it's okay. Again, totally different mindset. But I do believe continuous improvement is a great way to go with KPIs.
All right, great. Thank you, Hugo. All right, let's get to a few more questions here. Here's a quick question for Kimberly. You talked about the Gray Hats initiative and group. What departments were involved in that?
So that photo that you saw and all of our foreign material eradication teams are made up. There were maintenance, technicians and management. There were members from shipping and receiving. There were members from food safety and quality, and members of our general operations production team. So again, it was cross-functional across people who maintain our plants, people who monitor food safety and quality, and the people who are making the product and shipping the product are all represented on our foreign material eradication teams.
Great. Thanks, Kimberly, for that background. All right. So I'm going to ask a question to Lone, and then I've got a great question for all 3 of you after that. So Lone, the question is, this person's a consultant. They work with many small companies, and they're 100% in on cross-functional team involvement. How do you recommend accomplishing change management in very small organizations where only a few employees have responsibility for a lot of things?
I actually think that sometimes it's simpler. It's simpler than in a very large organization because you don't have as many people that are more peripheral to why we're making this change. I think in a small company, the opportunity you got to take is to say, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Be really specific about it, really define it well, and then say, no, almost like we run sprints around solving problems. If you're looking at it from a system perspective, run a short sprint, 7 days, come to a solution, close it out, and then go to the next, right? So I think the opportunity that small companies have versus very, very large is that there's not as many voices that have to be aligned so that you can actually create lasting change. And I have to make a plug, Adrian, you know that. Stop Foodborne Illness has a fantastic toolkit that's free. You can go on to stopfoodborneillness.org. There's some really good resources there that is they're especially geared towards small and medium companies.
Yeah, absolutely. The food safety culture toolkits from Stop Foodborne Illness are great resources, Lone, and thanks for mentioning them. All right, now we're going to take time for one last question. I'd like to ask this to everybody. I think I'll ask Kim maybe to respond first. Now, do you think that there needs to be a change in how food safety versus food quality departments are structured? So specifically, should food safety professionals be completely separated from quality? Is there any value to that process versus keeping food safety and quality all under one umbrella? If you could speak some thoughts to that question.
Sure, absolutely. Because that was a significant part of our change journey. So organizationally, we restructured and reorganized. So we now have actually a more robust and a larger corporate food safety and quality team. You know, they still, food safety, food quality, all fall underneath FSQA. However, they now report into a vice president of food safety. We have corporate directors who reach out and support all of our plants, the food safety management. They all now flow up under that chain to food safety leadership. Whereas before, you would have found that in our organization under operations. And, you know, it's tough to put those types of decisions, I think, in the hands of operations when they are looking at something and they think they've, you know, avoided a food safety or quality issue in that moment. Okay, let's just keep rolling. Because those were our habits. That was our objective. And so now with our org chart separated out, again, lots of collaboration as you heard in our journey, but we do have that whole entire team now reporting and working under its own organizational section on the org chart. And it's been a huge difference maker, big change for us, for operations especially, to look at that differently. But here we are several years later, and it's been a big part, I think, of our journey and our success.
Great. Thank you, Kim. I think it's helpful for folks to hear how some of these things are structured in different companies and what, makes for successful change management. Hugo, I'd like to invite you to also comment on that attendee's question about, how do you structure food safety, quality assurance? Should they be all together, or is there a reason to separate out those functions into different groups?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and let me start slightly different. I think a lot of this is in our responsibility in our community to present ourselves as a business partner. I think that's where everything should start. Early in my career, I got a feedback to say, you speak too much Ph.D. You don't speak to enough business. So I think that's a change that we all need to do regardless of structure. A structure is a small item, in my opinion. I think what is important is that we, in the food safety area or quality, we must ensure a seat at the table. So in my journeys, professional journey, I have reported to a CEO, I have reported to a COO, I have reported to R&D, you name it, all over. And I think what is being important is to make sure that I have a strong voice at the table. My previous role was chief officer. It's not different than vice president or senior director. I think it was pretty much the same. What it did for me is to ensure a voice to the board of directors and to the CEO. I think that's probably the most important thing. So we represent a group of people that are important for a company. We need to give them the name and the respect that they deserve in a company. But they also need to help themselves. I mean, if they only see themselves as a science people, I think that's a mistake. If they see themselves as a great technical people that help a company to grow and they have a role in the business, I think that's probably where we start. And then we should fight for a position, a role at the table, either at the board or with the link to the CEO. I think a structure comes later. It could be helpful. I don't want to say that, but at the very least, we must ensure a voice with the CEO. Hopefully, we get invited to the board of directors so they can hear from us what is important for us, what is the help that we need, and why they need to be linked to the work that we do.
Great, Hugo. Thanks for those insights. And then finally, Lone, I'd like you, to speak from your experience in industry and also with your clients. So, about how you structure food safety and quality assurance functions or function. What are your thoughts?
I think we have to acknowledge that not one size or shape is suitable for everybody. And so organizational structure, so the form has to follow the function, right? So what is it actually that we're trying to do? So Kim and Hugo has both talked about transformations. I believe, and I believe that we're seeing a lot of success with this, is that when you're trying to transform your organizational culture so that you support and you deliver higher performance in food safety, then a change in organizational structure where you have direct reporting relationship into the most senior leader is advantageous. And I think it can't be underestimated that structure influences how decisions are made. So form follows function, right? And I think it's if you're in at the other end of the spectrum, so it's an organization that's very mature in their organizational culture and also food safety, then you might actually have a more nimble and less complex structure where within a plant, the plant manager is responsible for the entire goings on in that plant, because the major and most critical decisions are the ones that happen in the front lines. So in the moment when there's something that has to be changed, it happens at the front line. It doesn't actually really matter if you have a direct line to the CEO anymore, because it's at the front line that those frontline teams are empowered to make the decisions needed. So I think you have to acknowledge that where you at. So just take those two simple questions that I asked, and Kim and Hugo have both added some great questions in here. You can ask yourselves as well and say, where are we at? What are we trying to do with this? What's the problem we're trying to solve by focusing on our food safety culture? And then decide on what's the best organizational structure to support you in that. I can't say that enough, Adrian, because I see a lot of broken hearts out there of people who have tried to change what they do for food safety from within a food safety and quality organization, but where there has not been the structure to actually support them. So that would be my first question before I do anything in this, if I'm in food safety and quality, is to say, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the structure that we need to be able to solve that problem consistently?
Well, thank you so much, Lone, for those thoughts. And thank you for this great discussion we've just had. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have to address questions today, but please join me in thanking Lone, Kimberly, and Hugo for their presentations. Now, if you have any additional questions or comments, and also the ones we didn't get to today, please don't hesitate to click that email us button on the console, and we'll be sending all those questions directly to our presenters so that they can respond to you. And if you didn't have a chance to fill it out earlier, you'll be redirected shortly to that post-event webinar survey. Again, we always look forward to your thoughts on those surveys. Also, please make sure to visit the archive of this presentation at food-safety.com /webinars, and you can find this presentation to share with your colleagues, and then also learn about our other upcoming events. And also, real quick, please save the date for our annual Food Safety Summit from May 12th to the 15th in Rosemont, Illinois. The Food Safety Summit will give you the opportunity to connect with your peers, learn from and network with leading subject matter experts, and so much more. Registration's open, so click that Food Safety Summit logo on the bottom right of the console for more information. And as a thank you for being a valuable webinar attendee, we'd like to offer you 10% off of your Food Safety Summit registration. You can use the code WEBINAR25 altogether at checkout. You can get 10% off your registration for the 2025 Food Safety Summit. So with that said, we appreciate your time in this webinar today. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you found it insightful, and have a great day.